The smartphone industry. Currently, there are 1.4 billion smartphones in the world. The industry is expected to be worth $314 billion by 2015, with $2.6 trillion of revenue in the next 4 years. The industry is becoming a force to be reckoned with.
You are watching Cold Fusion.
Doesn't all of this seem familiar? Does it remind you of something? It should, because history is actually repeating itself. In the mid-1980s, the PC market rush was in full swing. It got to the stage where every few months there would be a new machine that was faster and could do more. The result? Businesses, both large and small, now had access to computing power. Spreadsheets and all the work could be done in an instant instead of spending days slaving away. It changed the world. Fast forwarding through time about 25 years or so, and exactly the same thing is happening. The smartphone rush. This time, the focus is on functionality, features, and power. Remember, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Aggressive marketing is key, and it seems that everywhere you turn, there's a new phone being pushed out by a manufacturer that has something new to offer. But there's one series of phone that's always stood out from the crowd and has even been a trendsetter for the phablet large screen category. Of course, it's the Note series. And today, let's look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 3. Let's jump straight into it, beginning with the phone's hardware. This review will be based on the Snapdragon 800 model. So most of you know the specs already, so let's not really get hung up on them. But just for quick reference, the system and a chip powering this device is the Snapdragon 800 with 4 Crate 400 CPUs clocked at 2.3 GHz each. The CPU is built with a 28nm die process. The CPU is coupled with 3GB of RAM and the Adreno 330 GPU. The GPU here is really the star, with 129.6 billion floating single-point operations per second. It's no slouch. Anyway, it's needless to say that there's enough power for even the most demanding users. The GPU is pushing all the pixels it comes across to a 5.7-inch 1080p Super AMOLED screen with non-PenTile matrix technology. The battery is a whopping 3200 mAh beast, and it lasts. We'll get to that a little bit later. The rear camera is a 13-megapixel shooter, capable of 4K ultra-high definition video recording, and there's a 2-megapixel camera at the front. Alright, so let's move on to the build quality. Looking at the Galaxy Note 3 at face value, it's easy to tell that it's a Samsung device, but looking a little bit closer, you'll be able to see that Samsung has taken some retro cues from the original Galaxy Note, maybe even the Galaxy S2, and mixed it in with a bit of the newer flavour from the Galaxy S4. I actually think it's one of the better designs from Samsung, much better than that horrible rounded pebble phase that they went through with the Galaxy S3 in 2012. As far as the actual build quality goes, it's much better than Samsung's previous offerings, and it actually feels nice in the hand. There's no creaking or flexing, and it feels fairly solid. Around the side of the device, we have a plastic band with a metallic finish, and I can understand why Samsung have opted to use plastic instead of so-called premium materials such as aluminium or any other metals like that. It's really just to avoid those dents and scratches that can happen in day-to-day usage. On the back of the device, we have that plastic back panel with that fake leather finish. The grip texture is nice in the hand, but some people may find it a little bit gimmicky. It really all comes down to personal preference. I personally think it feels a lot better than glossy plastic, but some people may just find it a bit tacky to begin with. The phone is light at 168 grams and it's fairly thin at 8.3mm. Today, screens are the main feature of a smartphone. You use the screen for everything. So how is the screen? From normal viewing distances, you get a clean, crisp, sharp picture with very large viewing angles. But if you peer really closely, you can actually begin to start seeing the pixels. It's well beyond normal viewing distances, but it's just something that I noticed. Moving on. An interesting point to note about the device is that even though the Note 3 has a larger screen than its predecessor, it's actually smaller in every single way. It's thinner, narrower, slightly shorter, and lighter. The Note 3 gets a nice 7.5 out of 10 for build quality. Still on the topic of hardware, let's move on to connectivity. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is the USB 3.0 port. It allows for faster transfer of data and faster charging. The good thing is that it's backwards compatible, so all your regular micro USB cables work with it. One interesting thing you can do is you can get a micro USB on the go cable for about $2 or $3 on eBay or something like that, and you can plug in a USB stick into the device directly. Samsung has had on-the-go USB capabilities on its mind because when you plug in the USB stick, it automatically recognizes that a USB stick has been plugged into the device, and then it brings up a software suite of different things that you can do, like browse pictures and open files just directly, so that's good. Another thing that you can do is use a Bluetooth keyboard or mouse. So say I've got an Apple keyboard here, an Apple Bluetooth mouse, and you can just connect it natively. There's various uses for this, but one is obviously plugging it into an HDMI out monitor and then doing some work or whatever you need to do in that sense. Speaking of using your Galaxy Note 3 as a workstation, it actually works surprisingly well when hooked up like this. The two reasons: the Snapdragon 800 can push out 1080p with no problems, so everything runs fast and fluid, much more so than last year's Note. And the second thing, some of Samsung's software offerings, such as the drag and drop feature. The strange thing is, these software features still make sense when hooking the device up like this, maybe even more so than using the Galaxy Note 3 as a standalone device. It's pretty interesting. There's really nothing to complain about in the connectivity section, so the Galaxy Note 3 gets a 10 out of 10. Okay, so the part you've all been waiting for, performance. With the Galaxy Note 3, it's all about speed. The phone can pretty much handle anything you throw at it, all thanks to the Snapdragon 800 system on a chip. With day-to-day performance, things such as web browsing, opening up files, scrolling, and just general activities all happen rapidly with very little delay. It's all what you'd expect from a device of this caliber. I've already talked about performance on a previous episode of Cold Fusion TV, so I'll just play some highlights from that episode so you guys can get an idea. What you're about to see is going to be pretty confusing if I don't explain it. So basically in this video I was kind of demonstrating how powerful the Galaxy Note 3 is, so I was using augmented reality to really demonstrate that. So the setup is a Galaxy Note 3 connected to an HDMI output, and I'm pointing the Galaxy Note 3's camera at a tablet. The viewfinder from the Galaxy Note 3's camera is displayed on the PC monitor. So usually when it comes to performance, nobody really demonstrates the raw power of devices under review. But here, in this extract, you'll clearly, and I mean clearly, be able to see the advances that have been made in just 1 year in the smartphone industry. So here we have a highly detailed model that's been tracked in real time and whose movements are being processed by the Note 3's CPU and GPU. It's running smoothly, so it looks pretty easy to do, right? Well, let's start comparing. Here we have an HTC One, released in 2013 as well, and it's got 50% less GPU power, and there's a slight drop in frame rate. Here we have the Lenovo K900 with an Intel processor, and we can see that the GPU is noticeably weaker. And then here we have last year's Galaxy Note 2. Now there's just a stark difference here. You can totally see that the GPU can't really keep up with tracking this highly textured model in real time, so it's not really an acceptable experience. And coming back to the Galaxy Note 3, need I say more? You can just really see the difference there. Anyway, with that we're going to take a short break and be back after this.
You are watching Cold Fusion.
Okay, so what, you may be thinking, the Note 3 is obviously more powerful than the Note 2, but let me demonstrate a little bit more of just how much more powerful it is. It's important to remember that the Note 3 is also outputting this at 1080p, which the Note 2 wasn't, and it struggled with just one model. But meanwhile, on the Note 3 we can add more and more objects to the scene, some animated, still outputting to 1080p with very little slowdown. It's really remarkable what the engineers behind the chipset have done in such a short time. So you guys may be wondering what those red bouncing bars are at the top of the screen. That's actually the CPU activity in real time. Later on in this episode, it was very evident that the Galaxy Note 3's GPU was much more powerful than its predecessor. I used the Anomaly 2 benchmark to demonstrate this. Even though benchmarks aren't the most reliable thing these days, there's no denying the stark contrast. So to summarise the performance, whether it be gaming or day-to-day use, the Galaxy Note 3 has enough power for you. It gets a very solid 9 out of 10. A point deducted for the occasional stutter that I have noticed. It's very rare though. Let's move on to an increasingly important part of any modern smartphone, the camera. This is one of the strongest points of the Note 3. Photos usually turn out great in most conditions, and you shouldn't have many problems taking decent shots even in lower lighting. But the real star is the video camera. I really noticed that there was some potential to get some great videography shots beyond the realm of the typical smartphone camera. With 4K ultra high definition video recording, this camera is the only one of its kind in the mobile industry. Even most standalone cameras don't shoot 4K. So in typical fashion, I pushed the camera to the limits, and what I found was quite pleasing. If you shoot in 4K ultra high definition video and shoot at 4 times maximum zoom, you still have enough resolution to have a clear, crisp picture, but with simultaneously great macro detail. So I'll leave you guys just for a second so you can admire the shots yourself. Now I think the coolest thing about this is the range of shots that you can get. So you can go all the way zooming into an ant and see all the details, to wide panoramic scenes. Now I have a Canon 600D DSLR camera and I can't really do this. I need to change the lenses depending on the different shots that I can take. So it's just cool to have this kind of thing in your pocket. The one thing that stops this camera from just running away from the rest is the lack of optical image stabilization. Now in saying this, it's not a problem for general shooting, but when shooting these close-up macro shots, the camera shake can be an issue. Slow motion video makes a return on the Note 3. While 720p video is possible at 60 frames per second, for anything in ultra slow motion, so say 240 frames per second, the Note 3 is going to be shooting in sub HD quality unfortunately. The slow motion camera is one of my favourite features about the Note 3's video camera. It can be a lot of fun, and you can get some pretty cool results. So the verdict? The camera gets a solid 9 out of 10. A point was deducted for no optical image stabilization. Alright, so let's move on to the S Pen and some related software. The S Pen is what really makes the Galaxy Note 3 stand out from the crowd. The design has been slightly changed from the previous iteration. It can now slot in both ways, which is nice. There's now a nice rubber tip on the end of the pen, which gives it a more realistic feel. Handwriting recognition is simply mind-blowing. Pretty much, if you can read it, you'll recognize it. And even then some. It's definitely hands down the best handwriting recognition I've ever seen. The pen now seems more integrated with the software, and when you hover the pen above the screen and press the action button, you're greeted with Air Command. From here you can do things such as draw resizable windows and access Scrapbooker, but I think I'll show you some of the more useful but lesser known things that the S Pen can do. There's an option called Screen Write, and when you click on it, it automatically takes a screenshot of your screen, and straight away it's ready for editing. This cuts out a lot of steps that were previously necessary in last year's Note model. Once you're done with your editing, you can instantly send it off to whoever or whatever service you want. But on top of this, there's been some software tweaks that make things a little bit easier. Say I want to send the picture of this TV to my friend over Gmail, but at the same time I'd like to send it to another person in text message. Now I can simply just drag and drop the item. It's really simple and there's no reason why Samsung shouldn't have done this in the first place, but I'm glad it's here now and it makes things a lot easier. I'm actually going to be a troll and I'm going to send this message to my friend to see what she says. Alright, say you're on a call and you really need to write down a number. The person on the line asks, "You got a pen?" I'm sure many of you have had this situation. All you need to do is whip out the S Pen and click on the action memo. You can write any information you want and a phone number, and you can choose a whole host of actions that you want to complete, such as call, save as a contact, email, search on maps, search the internet, and more. When you don't need the memo anymore, you can just simply minimize it and it stays floating on top of whatever you're doing. Multi-window also gets some cool new features as well. Say you like doing 2 things at once, but you like doing the same 2 things at once quite often. So for instance, I like watching YouTube videos and browsing the web at the same time sometimes, so I'd like to save this pair. This is possible. All you need to do is scroll down to the bottom of the multitasking menu and then click Create New, rename it to what you want, and then the very next time you want to use multitasking, you can use this custom pair straight away. Now the thing about this is it takes a while to remember that it's there, but once you start using it, it's actually pretty cool. Multitasking inception happens here, so there's multitasking within multitasking, and with 3 GB of RAM, that leaves a lot of room for multitasking. Now also, if you have multiple instances of the same app open, there's now a thumbnail preview of each state. If any of you are wondering about that text message, all I got was an underwhelming, huh? But she herself admitted that it was a very underwhelming reaction. Speaking of messaging, there's a little tip that's always been here, but many people don't know. If you swipe to the right, you can call the contact directly, and swiping to the left enables messaging. There's a function to open apps such as the camera straight from the lock screen via voice command. You can say things such as, "Open camera," and it will open the app directly for you. You'd be hard pressed to find a use for it in an outdoor environment though, but it's still there. So all those Galaxy S4 features make their way to the Note 3 such as Air View, Air Gesture, Air, and Air. The uses for this are questionable, but say, hey, you're eating some barbecue ribs and then you can't really touch the phone, then you can swipe to your heart's content and show all your friends your photos. One-handed operation also gets some cool features, such as swiping in from the left or right bezel to create a sort of emulation mode. So basically this is for the people that think the Galaxy Note 3 is too big for them. Now they can have their cake and eat it. They can have the device with a smaller screen that's manageable for one-handed use, and then go back to the full screen if they want to have two-handed use, if that's comfortable for them. The screen size is about the same as an iPhone 5S's. Fully adjustable, of course. So the software gets an 8.5 out of 10. 0.5 points were deducted for Samsung's complete lack of any sense of design whatsoever, and 1 point was deducted for the occasional TouchWiz stutter. Okay, so we're pretty much done. Just a couple of things to glance over. The first one, battery life. It is outstanding. It easily lasts a day, even with heavy use. And with light to moderate use, you'll be looking at about 2 days. I haven't yet had to worry about recharging while I was out. Battery life gets a 10 out of 10, nothing comes close, period. Alright, the second thing, audio. This one's a mixed bag because when you use the actual phone speakers, the output is quite tinny and worse than the Galaxy Note 2 speakers. So that's about a 5.5 out of 10. But when you plug in the headphones, wow. Let me just say, this is one of the best sounding devices I've heard in years. It actually reminds me of listening to a Discman. The only words I can really use to describe it is layered and wide. The stereo seems to be a lot wider than most other devices out there. Even my iPod. Couple this with a custom EQ, and I've actually had to put my iPod down for quite a while because I was just so amazed by the sound. So for headphones, you're getting a perfect 10 out of 10, so the combined audio score is 7.75 out of 10. So what to make of all of this? The conclusion. If you want the best all-rounder phone that's pretty much good at everything, then the Galaxy Note 3 is for you. No phone even comes remotely close to what the Galaxy Note 3 is capable of. Of course it's not perfect, no phone is, but it's probably the closest you're going to get for the Android experience. So, in the crazy sea of phones that seem to get updated at least once every single month, the Galaxy Note 3 is one that stands out, and it really is worth a look. So with a final score of 85.5%, the Galaxy Note 3 is a go. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video the whole way through. I know it was quite a long video, so you guys have done pretty well. So anyway, I just want to say, as usual, thanks for watching, and don't forget to rate, comment and subscribe. And even if you feel to share this video to other people, like any little bit thing you do can really help this channel out. So until next time, you've been watching Cold Fusion. Catch you guys later.
Cold Fusion. It's new thinking.